What would make a veteran emergency room nurse with 12 years of experience walk away from medicine forever after just one shift? In today's story, you'll discover what I witnessed during what should have been an ordinary Thursday night at Memorial General Hospital, and why the events of that evening still keep me awake 3 years later. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button to help us reach our next milestone. Drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from, and stick around until the end, because what happened that night challenges everything. We think we know about life, death, and the mysteries are certain moments and that exist in between. They're your career. When you realize that everything you thought you understood about the natural order of things was just scratching the surface of something far more complex and distant years now, and only recently carried one such moment with me for over 3 Bing. I found the courage to share what really happened that October night. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I was a registered nurse in the emergency department at Memorial General Hospital for 12 years before I made the decision to leave healthcare entirely. Throughout my career, I prided myself on staying calm under pressure, thinking rationally in crisis situations, and maintaining my composure even when facing the most traumatic cases that came through our doors. I had seen everything you could imagine. Car accidents where victims arrived barely clinging to life. Drug overdoses that pushed patients to the very edge of death. Heart attacks, strokes, violent crimes, and medical emergencies that would leave most people shaken for weeks. I thought I had developed an unshakable understanding of the boundary between life and death, between what was medically possible and what existed beyond our comprehension. I was completely wrong. The events I'm about to describe took place during my night shift on October 12, 2021, at Memorial General Hospital, a 200-bed facility serving our city's downtown area and surrounding communities. I had been working the emergency department for over a decade, and October 12th started exactly like thousands of other shifts I had worked before it. Memorial General was built in the 1960s, a concrete and steel structure that had served our community faithfully for decades. The emergency department was located on the ground floor, consisting of 24 treatment bays, 3 trauma rooms, and a dedicated pediatric area. The layout was functional but aging, with fluorescent lights that hummed constantly and linoleum floors that had seen better days. That particular Thursday evening, I arrived for my 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift feeling refreshed and ready for whatever the night might bring. October had been relatively quiet compared to the summer months, when heat and increase brought more patients through activity, typically outdoors. I was assigned to work in the main treatment area alongside Dr. Michael Chen, one of our most experienced emergency physicians, and Janet Williams, another nurse who had been with the hospital for nearly 20 years. Our patient census that night was moderate. 15 patients were already being treated when I arrived, with the usual mix of conditions we saw on weeknight shifts. A construction worker with a possible broken wrist, an elderly woman experiencing chest pains, a college student with what appeared to be food poisoning, and several other cases that fell well within the range of normal emergency medicine. The first few hours of my shift passed without incident. We treated patients, discharged those who were stable, and admitted others who required ongoing care. Dr. Chen and I worked together efficiently, having developed a rhythm over the years that allowed us to handle even complex cases with minimal communication needed. It was around 10:30 p.m. when everything changed. The ambulance call came in through our emergency dispatch system. Memorial General. We have a 34-year-old male, unconscious, found down in his apartment by roommate. No pulse, no respirations on scene. CPR initiated by first responders approximately 15 minutes ago. ETA 4 minutes. Dr. Chen looked at me across the nurses' station. "Sarah, let's get trauma room 2 ready. Sounds like we might have a save here if we move fast. I immediately began preparing Trauma Room 2 for a cardiac arrest case. We pulled out the crash cart, checked our defibrillator, prepared medications for advanced cardiac life support, and made sure all our monitoring equipment was functioning properly. Janet joined us, along with respiratory therapist David Kim and our newest resident, Dr. Amanda Foster. When the paramedics wheeled in our patient, I got my first look at him. His name was Marcus Thompson, according to the information provided by Emergency Medical Services. He was a thin man in his mid-30s with dark hair and what appeared to be a well-maintained physical condition despite his current state. The paramedics had been performing CPR continuously during transport, but his condition appeared grave. Patient found down by his roommate around 10 p.m., the lead paramedic reported as we transferred Marcus to our trauma bed. Roommate states patient was complaining of feeling dizzy and nauseous earlier in the evening. No known medical history, no medications, no drug use according to roommate. We've been doing no return CPR for approximately 20 minutes with Chen immediately of spontaneous circulation. Doctor took charge of the resuscitation effort. Sarah, get me an IV line established. David, I need you to take over ventilations. Amanda, start compressions and let's get him on the monitor. I quickly inserted an intravenous line into Marcus's left arm while Dr. Foster began chest compressions. The cardiac monitor showed flatline activity, indicating no electrical activity in his heart. This was not encouraging, but we had seen patients recover from similar presentations before. Let's push 1 milligram of epinephrine, Dr. Chen ordered. Sarah, draw up some atropine as well. As I prepared the medications, I noticed something that seemed slightly unusual. Despite having been without circulation for over 20 minutes, Marcus's skin tone appeared better than I would have expected. Patients who have been in cardiac arrest for extended periods typically develop a grayish, mottled appearance as oxygen deprivation affects their tissues. But Marcus looked almost peaceful, as if he were simply sleeping rather than in full cardiac arrest. We continued our resuscitation efforts for another 15 minutes following standard advanced cardiac life support protocols. Dr. Chen administered multiple rounds of medications. We attempted defibrillation several times despite the absence of shockable rhythms, and Dr. Foster performed continuous chest compressions with brief breaks for rhythm checks. But nothing we did produced any change in Marcus's condition. The monitor continued to show a systole, the absence of any cardiac electrical activity. His pupils were fixed and dilated, indicating severe brain injury from lack of oxygen. By all medical standards, Marcus Thompson had been dead for nearly 40 minutes. Dr. Chen looked around at our team. I think we've done, what's our total, everything we can. Sarah, minutes since the roommate found him down time. Approximately 42, I replied, checking the timeline we had documented. Right team, I'm going to call Allet. Time 11:18. The most difficult part of emergency of death PM, nursing. Despite. This was always our best efforts. We couldn't save every patient who came through our doors. Marcus Thompson appeared to be another tragic case of sudden cardiac death in a young, otherwise healthy person. But as Dr. Chen reached over to turn off the cardiac monitor, something happened that I still cannot explain, even 3 years later. The monitor, which had shown nothing but flatline activity for over 40 minutes, suddenly displayed a normal heart rhythm. Not just any rhythm, but a strong regular sinus rhythm at approximately 75 beats per minute. I stared at the monitor in complete disbelief. The crisp, regular pattern of electrical activity moved across the screen as if Marcus had simply awakened from a peaceful sleep. But that was medically impossible. Patients don't spontaneously develop perfect heart rhythms after 40 minutes of cardiac arrest. Dr. Chen, I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Look at the monitor." Everyone in Trauma Room 2 turned their attention to the cardiac display. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping that indicated Marcus Thompson's heart was now beating normally. "That can't be right," Dr. Foster said, still positioned over Marcus's chest where she had been performing compressions moments earlier. "The leads must have shifted, or there's some kind of equipment malfunction." Dr. Chen immediately checked all our monitoring connections. Every electrode was properly attached. Every wire was secure, and the monitor itself was functioning normally. As he examined our equipment, I noticed something even more disturbing. Marcus's skin color was improving. The pale, lifeless appearance that had characterized his condition throughout our resuscitation efforts was being replaced by a healthy pink complexion. His chest began to rise and fall with spontaneous respirations. "Sarah, check for a pulse," Dr. Chen ordered, his voice tight with confusion. I placed my fingers on Marcus's carotid artery, expecting to feel nothing, despite what the monitor was showing. Instead, I felt a strong, regular pulse that matched the rhythm displayed on our cardiac monitor perfectly. "He has a pulse, Dr. Chen. Strong and regular." David Kim, our respiratory therapist, had been manually ventilating Marcus throughout the resuscitation attempt. "His color is returning," David observed, "and he's starting to breathe on his own." This was beyond unusual. This was impossible. Patients who have been in cardiac arrest for 40 minutes don't suddenly develop normal vital signs. The human brain cannot survive that long without oxygen. Even if spontaneous circulation somehow returned, Marcus should have suffered massive brain damage that would leave him in a permanent vegetative state. But as we watched in amazement, Marcus's vital signs continued to improve. His blood pressure, which had been un-hour detectable throughout resuscitation efforts, registered at 120/80. His oxygen saturation levels climbed to 98%. His temperature was normal. Most remarkably, Marcus began showing signs of neurological function. His pupils, which had been fixed and dilated indicating severe brain injury, became reactive to light. His muscle tone returned, and he began making with his hands small movements and feet. "This dickly impossible," Dr. Chen said team. Janet to himself then to ours med quietly. "Moore, call Dr. Martinez and ask her to come down here immediately." Dr. Elena Martinez was our chief of emergency medicine, a physician with over 25 years of experience who had seen every conceivable type of medical case. If anyone could provide insight into what we were witnessing, it would be her. While we waited for Dr. Martinez to arrive, I continued monitoring Marcus's condition. Every parameter we checked indicated that he was not only alive, but in remarkably good health. His heart rhythm stable remain, his breathing was unlabored, and his neurological responses continued to improve. At 11:35 p.m., just 17 minutes after Dr. Chen had pronounced him dead, Marcus Thompson opened his eyes. He looked around the trauma room with clear, alert eyes, taking in the faces of our medical team and the equipment surrounding his bed. There was no confusion, no disorientation, no signs of the cognitive impairment that would be expected after such prolonged oxygen deprivation. "Where am I?" Marcus asked, his voice clear and strong. Dr. Foster she was holding. "You're in nearly dropped the clipboard the emergency room at Memorial General Hospital," she managed to say. "What happened to me?" Marcus continued. "I remember feeling dizzy. It went dark. Home, and then everything I exchanged glances with Dr. Chen. How could we possibly explain to this patient that he had been clinically dead for over 40 minutes? That we had performed extensive resuscitation efforts with no success? That we had pronounced him dead and were preparing to contact the medical examiner? "Marcus, you experienced a cardiac arrest," Dr. Chen said carefully. "Your roommate found you unconscious and called 911. The paramedics brought you here, and we've been treating you." "How long was I unconscious?" Marcus asked, attempting to sit up on the stretcher. "Please lie still," I instructed, gently placing my hand on his shoulder. "You need to rest while we run some tests." Dr. Martinez arrived at that moment and immediately took charge of the situation. After reviewing our documentation and examining Marcus personally, she was as baffled as the rest of us. "In 30 years of emergency medicine, I have never seen anything like this," she confided to our team outside Marcus's room. "By every medical standard we have, this patient was dead. The timeline is clear, the documentation is thorough, and your resuscitation efforts were appropriate. Yet here he is, not only alive, but showing no signs of neurological damage whatsoever." We ordered comprehensive testing for Marcus. Blood work, chest x-rays, CT scans of his brain and chest, an echocardiogram to evaluate his heart function, and an EEG to assess his brain activity. Every single test came back completely normal. His blood chemistry showed no signs of drug intoxication or poisoning. His heart appeared struck excellently normal with function. His brain scans revealed no evidence of oxygen deprivation or injury. According to every diagnostic tool available to modern medicine, Marcus Thompson was a perfectly healthy 34-year-old man. But the most disturbing aspect of Marcus's case wasn't his miraculous recovery. It was what he began telling us about his experience during those 40 minutes when he had no pulse, no brain activity, and no signs of life. "I remember everything," Marcus said as Dr. Martinez interviewed him later that evening. "I could see all of you working on me. I watch and doing chest compressions. I could heard you giving me medications every word you said." Dr. Martinez led no brain activity during and forward. "Marcus, that's not that time. I'm medically possible. You know it sounds crazy," Marcus replied. "And experiencing it from inside but I wasn't, like I was floating body. I was watching from above near the ceiling. I could see the whole room, all the equipment, everything you were doing." This description matched accounts I had heard before from patients who claimed to have near-death experiences. But Marcus's case was different. He hadn't been near death. He had been dead by every medical definition we had. "Can you describe what you saw?" I asked, curious to test the accuracy of his observations. Marcus proceeded to describe our resuscitation efforts in perfect detail. He knew which medications we had administered and when. He accurately described the positions each team member had taken around his bed. He even mentioned specific conversations we had held during the procedure. Most remarkably, Marcus described events that had occurred in other parts of the emergency department during his cardiac arrest. He knew about the elderly woman in Bay 7 who had been experiencing chest pains. He described the construction worker who had been waiting for X-ray results. He even provided details about conversations between staff members that had taken place outside his room. When we verified his observations, everything he described was completely accurate. Marcus's knowledge of events throughout the emergency department that night was impossible to explain through conventional medical understanding. He described details about patients and staff interactions that had occurred while he was clinically dead, information he couldn't have accessed through normal sensory perception. The woman in Bay 7 was crying because she was worried about her granddaughter's wedding next week, Marcus said during Dr. Martinez's interview. She kept asking if she would be okay to travel, and the nurse with the short blonde hair was talking to someone on the phone about picking up her daughter from soccer practice. I felt a chill run down my spine. The woman in Bay 7 had indeed been concerned about attending her granddaughter's wedding, and Janet Williams had received a call from her ex-husband about their daughter's soccer practice. These were private conversations that had occurred while Marcus had no vital signs, Dr. Martinez documented everything Marcus reported, and over the following hours, we verified detail after detail. His observations were not just accurate, they were precise to a degree that seemed impossible. He knew the exact time certain events had occurred, the specific words people had used in conversations, and even subtle interactions between staff members that most people wouldn't have noticed. "Marcus," Dr. Martinez said carefully, "you're describing events that took place while you had no brain activity. From a medical perspective, consciousness requires a functioning brain." "I understand that, Doctor," Marcus replied calmly. "But I'm telling you what I experienced. I wasn't unconscious. I was more aware than I've ever been in my life. I could see everything happening not just in this room, but throughout the entire hospital floor." To test his claims further, Dr. Martinez asked Marcus to describe other areas of the hospital he claimed to have observed. Marcus provided detailed descriptions of the nurses' station layout, the medication room, and even the staff break room, including which vending machines were out of order and what magazines were sitting on the table. When security reviewed the surveillance footage from that evening, Marcus's descriptions proved accurate down to the smallest details. He had somehow observed areas of the hospital that were completely outside his physical location and line of sight. But Marcus's impossible awareness extended beyond just visual observations. He claimed to have heard conversations that had taken place in different departments, phone calls made by staff members, and even discussions between doctors in the hallway outside the emergency department. Dr. Peterson from cardiology was called about a patient in the CCU, Marcus said. He was frustrated because he had just gotten home and had to drive back to the hospital. He said something about missing his daughter's school play. We contacted Dr. Peterson to verify this information. He confirmed that he had indeed been called back to the hospital that evening for a cardiac emergency, and he had expressed frustration about missing his daughter's performance to the nurse who called him. The accuracy of Marcus's observations was becoming increasingly disturbing. Not only had he somehow maintained consciousness during clinical death, but his awareness had extended far beyond what should have been physically possible even if he had been conscious. As the night progressed, more details emerged about Marcus's experience that challenged our understanding of consciousness and perception. He described the emotions and thoughts of people he had observed, providing insights that went beyond mere visual or auditory information. The young doctor who was doing compressions was nervous, Marcus said, referring to Dr. Foster. She kept thinking about whether she was performing them correctly, worried that she might be doing something wrong. She's new to emergency medicine and still doubts herself sometimes. When I later spoke with Dr. Foster privately, she confirmed that she had indeed been anxious about her performance during the resuscitation. As a new resident, she often questioned her skills and worried about making mistakes in critical situations. Marcus's ability to perceive not just events, but the internal emotional states of people around him was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of his case. It suggested a level of awareness that transcended normal human consciousness. Dr. Martinez decided to keep into 2 hours to monitor his Marcus under observation for a sevic condition and conduct additional testing. Throughout his stay, he remained in perfect health. His vital signs were stable. His neurological function was normal, and he showed no signs of any medical complications from his prolonged cardiac arrest. But Marcus continued to demonstrate abilities that defied medical explanation. During his second day in the hospital, he accurately predicted which patients would be admitted to the emergency department before they arrived. He knew when staff members were having personal problems at home, and he could describe events happening in other parts of the hospital in real time. "There's going to be a car accident coming in about 20 minutes, Marcus told me during one of my visits to check on him. 3 teenagers. The driver fell asleep at the wheel. 2 will have minor injuries, but the passenger in the back seat has a serious head injury. I documented his prediction with a timestamp. 23 minutes later, 3 teenagers arrived by ambulance following a single car accident. The driver had fallen asleep, causing the vehicle to leave the roadway. 2 patients had minor injuries, but the backseat passenger had sustained a traumatic brain injury exactly as Marcus had predicted. These incidents occurred repeatedly throughout Marcus's hospital stay. He would make specific predictions about incoming patients, staff scheduling changes, equipment failures, and other hospital events. In every case, his predictions proved accurate. The nursing staff began to feel uncomfortable around Marcus, not because he was threatening or unpleasant, but because his impossible awareness made everyone feel exposed and vulnerable. He seemed to know things about people's personal lives, their thoughts, and their concerns that they had never shared with anyone. "It's like he can see into our souls," Janet Williams confided to me during a break. "Yesterday, he asked me about my mother's cancer diagnosis. I haven't told anyone at work about that. My mother was just diagnosed last week and I've been trying to keep it private." Similar incidents occurred with other staff members. Marcus would make casual comments that revealed intimate knowledge of people's personal situations, family problems, financial concerns, and health issues. He seemed genuinely concerned and supportive, but his knowledge was deeply unsettling to those who worked around him. Dr. Martinez consulted with specialists from neurology, psychiatry, and even parapsychology researchers from the nearby university. None could provide a satisfactory explanation for Marcus's abilities or his recovery from prolonged cardiac arrest. "We're dealing with something that exists outside current medical understanding," Dr. Martinez admitted during a staff meeting. "Marcus Thompson has fundamentally challenged everything we thought we knew about consciousness, death, and human awareness." On Marcus's 3rd day in the hospital, something happened that would haunt me for years to come. I was checking his vital signs during my evening rounds when he looked at me with an expression of deep sadness. "Sarah, I need to tell you something important," Marcus said quietly, "about your brother David." I felt my blood run cold. My brother David lived 3 states away, and I hadn't mentioned him to anyone at the hospital. We had been having some family difficulties, and I had been worried about his struggles with depression, but I had kept these concerns private. "What about my brother?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's in trouble right now," Marcus said gently. "He's sitting in his car in a parking lot, and he's thinking about ending his life. You need to call him immediately." I stared at Marcus in shock. There was no way he could have known about David's depression situation. Yet, or his current something in Marcus's tone and expression convinced me that he was telling the truth. With trembling hands, I called David's cell phone. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice hollow and distant. "Sarah, why are you calling so late?" "David, where are you right now?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I'm sitting in my car outside the mall. Sarah, I've been thinking about some things and I don't know if I can keep my heart pee going anymore." Had been absolutely ounded as I realized Marcus correct. My brother was spectating suicide at that exact moment. Indeed, contemplate the next hour on the phone with David, talking him through his crisis and convincing him to drive to the nearest emergency room for help. He later told me that my call had saved his life, that he had been moments away from taking action when I contacted him. When I returned to Marcus's room, he was sitting quietly in his bed, looking out the window at the city lights. "How did you know?" I asked him. "I don't understand it myself, Sarah," Marcus replied. "Since my experience during the cardiac arrest, I seem to be in ways when people are in distress, when never was before. I can sense connected to things moments in their lives. I saw a situation as clearly they're facing critical your brothers as if I were there with him. This His abilities weren't just a medical incident marked a turning point in how I viewed Marcus's case anomalies or interesting curiosities. They had affect people's lives in profound ways, real-world implications that could. Over the following days, Marcus's abilities continued to manifest in ways that left our entire medical team struggling to comprehend what we were witnessing. He would make casual observations about patients who hadn't even arrived at the hospital yet, describing their conditions with medical precision that rivaled our most experienced physicians. "The ambulance that's coming in 15 minutes is bringing a woman who appears to have had a stroke," Marcus mentioned during one of my routine checks. "But it's not a stroke. She has a rare condition called moya disease. The CT scan will look normal initially, but if you do an angiogram, you'll see the characteristic cloud-like appearance of blood vessels." I documented his statement and waited. 17 minutes later, paramedics brought in a 52-year-old woman presenting with stroke-like symptoms. Her initial CT scan appeared normal, exactly as Marcus had predicted. Dr. Chen, following Marcus's suggestion, ordered an angiogram that revealed the distinctive vascular pattern of moya disease, a rare condition that affects fewer than 1 in a million people. How could he possibly know about such an obscure medical condition? Dr. Chen asked me privately. Moya disease isn't something most emergency physicians encounter in their entire careers. Yet, Marcus described it perfectly before the patient even arrived. These incidents became increasingly frequent and specific. Marcus would predict equipment failures before they occurred, alerting us to problems with ventilators, defibrillators, and monitoring devices. His warnings allowed us to address issues before they could compromise patient care, but they also created an atmosphere of unease among the staff. "The IV pump in Bay 12 is going to malfunction during the night shift," Marcus told Janet Williams during his 4th day in the hospital. "It will start delivering medication too rapidly around 2:30 in the morning. You should have maintenance check it before then." Janet initially dismissed his warning, but she mentioned it to the night supervisor as a precaution. At exactly 2:28 a.m., the IV pump in Bay 12 began delivering medication at twice the programmed rate. The malfunction was caught immediately because the night staff had been alerted to watch for problems. Dr. Martinez decided to conduct more formal testing of Marcus's abilities, working with researchers from the university's psychology department. They designed controlled experiments to evaluate the extent and accuracy of his unusual awareness. In one test, they placed sealed envelopes containing random images in various locations throughout the hospital. Marcus was asked to describe the contents of each envelope without leaving his room. He accurately identified 23 out of 25 images, providing detailed descriptions that matched the photographs exactly. The envelope in the 3rd-floor supply closet contains a picture of a red bicycle with a basket, Marcus said during the test. "It's a child's bike, probably belonging to a girl, based on the decorative streamers on the handlebars. The background shows a park with oak trees." When researchers retrieved the envelope, they found a photograph of a red children's bicycle with a basket and pink streamers, photographed in a park setting with mature oak trees in the background. Marcus's description was precise in every detail. The testing continued for several days, with Marcus demonstrating consistent accuracy in describing objects, events, and situations that he had no normal means of observing. His abilities seemed to extend throughout the hospital and into the surrounding community. "Dr. Martinez, there's a fire starting in the apartment building 3 blocks east of here," Marcus announced during one evening test session. "It's on the 4th floor, in the kitchen of apartment 4B. An elderly man fell asleep while cooking, and the pan on the stove has ignited some curtains. The fire department hasn't been called yet." Dr. Martinez immediately contacted the fire department to report Marcus's observation. Fire crews arrived at the apartment building to find smoke beginning to emerge from a 4th-floor window. They evacuated an elderly resident who had indeed fallen asleep while cooking, and they extinguished a fire that had started when an overheated pan ignited nearby curtains. The accuracy of Marcus's remote observations was becoming impossible to dismiss as coincidence or lucky guessing. He was demonstrating awareness of events occurring miles away from the hospital, providing information that was consistently accurate and often life-saving. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Marcus's abilities was his apparent connection to people who were dying or in extreme medical distress. He would become agitated or emotional when patients in critical condition were brought to other hospitals in the city, even when he had no way of knowing about these cases. "There's a child at Children's Hospital who's coding right now," Marcus said urgently during his 6th day with us. "She's 7 years old, and she has leukemia. The resuscitation isn't working because they haven't identified that she has a rare clotting disorder. They need to give her factor concentrates immediately." Dr. Martinez was initially skeptical, but she decided to call Children's Hospital to inquire about any pediatric emergencies. The emergency department confirmed that they were indeed working on a 7-year-old leukemia patient who was not responding to standard resuscitation protocols. When Dr. Martinez suggested they check for clotting disorders and consider factor concentrate therapy, the pediatric team discovered that the child had an undiagnosed bleeding disorder that was complicating their resuscitation efforts. The factor concentrates helped stabilize her condition, and she ultimately survived. Marcus Thompson was discharged on his 7th day, returning to his normal life as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. The boundaries between life and death, between consciousness and unconsciousness, between the possible and impossible, had been shattered completely. I submitted my resignation 2 weeks later, unable to continue working in an environment where everything I thought I understood about medicine and human existence had been proven wrong. 3 years have passed since that October night, and I still wake up thinking about Marcus and the questions his case raised about the nature of consciousness, death, and what lies beyond our current medical understanding. I've heard that he occasionally visits the hospital, that his abilities have continued, and that he's helped save other lives through his impossible awareness. Sometimes I wonder if there are others like Marcus, people who've crossed that boundary between life and death and returned with abilities that challenge everything we think we know. I wonder how many patients in emergency rooms around the world might be experiencing consciousness in ways we can't detect or understand. The case of Marcus Thompson taught me that medicine, for all its advances and technologies, still operates within very narrow boundaries of understanding. There are aspects of human consciousness, of life and death, that exist far beyond what our textbooks and training can explain. I work in a clinic now, providing basic health care in a setting where the mysteries are smaller and the questions less disturbing. But I'll never forget that October night when a man returned from clinical death with abilities that defied every principle of medical science I had been taught to trust. Marcus Thompson's case remains officially unexplained in the hospital's records. Dr. Martinez documented everything meticulously, but the medical establishment has no framework for understanding what we witnessed. His case exists as an anomaly, filed away in archives where it won't challenge the comfortable certainties that allow healthcare professionals to function. But I know what I saw. I know what happened during those impossible days when a man who had been dead for 40 minutes demonstrated awareness that transcended every limitation we thought existed for human consciousness. The most haunting realization from Marcus's case isn't that he survived clinical death. It's that his experience suggests consciousness might exist independently of the physical brain, that awareness might continue in forms we don't recognize, and that death itself might not be the absolute boundary we've always believed it to be. I still think about my brother David, whose life was saved by Marcus's impossible knowledge. I think about the children and patients whose lives were spared because Marcus could somehow sense their distress from miles away. His abilities weren't just medical curiosities, they were profound gifts that connected him to human suffering in ways that allowed him to help heal it. The question that haunts me most isn't how Marcus developed these abilities, but whether they represent something that exists within all of us, something that becomes accessible only under the most extreme circumstances. If consciousness can truly transcend physical death, what does that mean for every patient who codes in every emergency room around the world? Are there others like Marcus who've crossed that threshold and returned with expanded awareness? Are there patients who maintain consciousness during procedures when we think they're unconscious? Are there aspects of death and dying that we're completely missing because our instruments can't detect them? Marcus Thompson's case changed not just my career, but my entire understanding of what it means to be human. It taught me that the boundary between life and death might be far more fluid than we realize, that consciousness might extend far beyond the physical limitations we've accepted as absolute. 3 years later, I still don't have answers to the questions his case raised. But I know that somewhere in this world, there's a man who died for 40 minutes and returned with abilities that prove our understanding of consciousness, death, and human awareness is incomplete. The most unsettling truth about Marcus Thompson's case is that it suggests everything we think we know about the nature of human existence might be wrong. And if we're wrong about something so fundamental, what other aspects of medicine and human experience are we completely misunderstanding? That October night at Memorial General Hospital didn't just challenge my medical knowledge. It challenged my understanding of reality itself. And 3 years later, I'm still trying to process the implications of what I witnessed when a man returned from death with impossible awareness that saved lives and revealed mysteries that medical science isn't ready to acknowledge. Marcus Thompson's story continues, but mine as an emergency room nurse ended that night. Some experiences change you so completely that you can never return to who you were before. Witnessing the impossible will do that to you. And sometimes, late at night, I still wonder if Marcus might somehow be aware of my thoughts right now, connected to the lives he touched in ways that transcend every boundary we thought existed between one consciousness and another. That's why I left medicine. That's why his case still haunts me. And that's why I'll never forget the night when everything I believed about life and death was proven wrong.